All right, let's get right into it. Something huge is happening across West Africa. We're talking about a revolutionary wave that's not just making headlines, it's challenging decades of foreign influence and maybe, just maybe, writing a whole new chapter for the continent. Okay, so check this out. In just a couple of years, the entire political map of the Sahel has been, well, completely redrawn. You've got Mali in 2020, then Burkina Faso, then Niger and Gabon in 2023. It's created what people are calling the coup belt. But here's the thing, this isn't just some random reshuffling. No, this feels different. It feels like a coordinated pushback against the old way of doing things. And that right there, that's the real story. These aren't just your typical military takeovers happening in a vacuum. Not at all. They're tapping into this deep, simmering anger from the public. Frustration over security that's just not there. Economies going nowhere. And this feeling that the so-called democratic governments weren't really working for them. This is a full-blown popular rejection of the way things have been since colonial times. So to really get why this is all boiling over right now, we've got to jump in the time machine and go way back. Because the seeds of what's happening today, well, they were planted over 100 years ago. They were planted in an economic blueprint that was all about one thing: extraction. Not development, but pure extraction. So, back in the 19th century, after the slave trade was abolished, the colonial powers needed a new way to make money. They needed a new kind of fuel for their economic engine, and they found it. They called it legitimate trade. Sounds nice, right? But what it really meant was a one-way street, taking Africa's raw materials, palm oil, cotton, you name it, and shipping them straight to factories in Europe. And you can bet the prices were set to benefit Europe, not Africa. And this chart, it's the perfect example of that model in action. Just look at the cocoa exports from what's now Ghana. The numbers just explode. But what does that really mean? It means the entire local economy got re-engineered to just pump out cocoa for export. It was never about creating a strong, diverse local economy. Nope. It was about making sure Africa was the first and lowest rung on a global supply ladder. Okay, so fast forward a bit. The colonial flags come down, new national flags go up, independence, right? Well, not exactly. Because even though the political chains were supposedly broken, the economic chains, they were still firmly in place. Powerful systems were left behind, almost like invisible puppet strings, ensuring that these new nations were still dependent on their old colonial rulers. It's what people today call neo-colonialism. And you want to see the most glaring example of this? Look no further than the CFA franc. I mean, think about this. It's a currency used by 14 African countries, but its value is tied to the euro and historically managed by France. So who's really in control of their economic destiny? It's not the leaders in those countries, that's for sure. So how does this actually work? Well, this is where it gets wild. Imagine you're running a country, and you're legally required to park half of your foreign currency reserves in the French treasury. Just think about that. How are you supposed to manage your own economy? How do you fight inflation or pay for new schools and hospitals? You can't. Not really. It's the definition of neocolonialism. Control without having to plant a flag. So, faced with a system that feels rigged, what do? Well, thinkers like Samir Amin came up with a radical idea: delinking. It's basically like saying, if the game is rigged, we're not going to play anymore. He argued that the only way for developing nations to get true independence was to selectively unplug from this exploitative global system. And that very idea? It's the playbook for what we're seeing today. All right, so you've got this pot of economic anger that's been simmering on the stove for decades, right? Just getting hotter and hotter. Then, over the last decade or so, you pour gasoline on it in the form of a massive security crisis. What do you get? You get a perfect storm, an explosion. You get the revolutions we're seeing unfold right now. And when I say crisis, I'm not exaggerating. Just look at this. In 2007, the Sahel was dealing with about 1% of the world's terrorism deaths. Fast forward to 2022, and that number skyrockets to 43%. 43%. And this was all while thousands of foreign troops, French, UN, you name it, were on the ground. For the people living there, it was crystal clear. Whatever the West was doing, it just wasn't working. And here's the crucial link. That failure wasn't just a military problem. For millions of people, it was the final piece of evidence. It proved that the old partnerships with the West weren't bringing safety. They were just keeping the old system of dependency going. So it wasn't just the foreign powers who lost all credibility. It was the local governments who were seen as their partners. And that's what opened the door for them to be swept away. So the old system shatters, leaving this huge power vacuum. And who steps in? New military leaders. But they don't just come in to keep the seat warm. They come in with a brand new playbook, a sovereign blueprint, you could call it. The goal? To take back complete control, to flip the script from being an exploited supplier to being an empowered owner. First things first, they blew up the old alliances. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger basically said, "We're out" to the main West African group, ECOWAS, because they saw it as just a mouthpiece for foreign powers. And what did they build instead? Their own club, the Alliance of Sahel States, a new bloc for mutual defense and, this is key, for building an economy that works for them. And what's their first move? They go straight for the crown jewels, their mineral wealth. They're rewriting the mining laws from the ground up. This isn't just about tweaking taxes. It's a complete change in philosophy. They're done being passive landlords just collecting a bit of rent. They're becoming owner-operators. Mali can now own up to 35% of a mine. Burkina Faso is demanding minerals be processed inside the country. That's a game changer for keeping the wealth at home. And guess what? This isn't just talk. It had immediate real-world results. Mali did a deep dive audit into its mining sector and found, wait for it, over $1.2 billion in unpaid revenues from foreign companies. $1 billion. That's not a symbolic victory. That's cold, hard cash. It's proof that their new strategy can actually work. So the playbook is bold. It's decisive, no doubt about it. But, and this is a big but, changing the laws on paper is one thing. Actually building a new future from the ground up, that is a whole different ballgame with some absolutely massive challenges. And this slide really lays it bare. On one hand, you have this incredible ambition, total sovereignty, regional power, building their own industries. But on the other hand, you have the brutal reality. I mean, how do you build factories when only a quarter of your rural population has electricity? How do you trade with your neighbors when the roads are terrible and most people aren't even online? These aren't small problems, they are gigantic hurdles. And that leaves us with the big multi-billion-dollar question, doesn't it? What we're watching is nothing short of historic. It's a real attempt to undo centuries of economic extraction. But can this revolutionary fire, this powerful ambition, actually overcome the massive real-world challenges on the ground to build a better life for ordinary people? The answer to that question will decide the future of the Sahel. And maybe, just maybe, it will ripple out across the rest of the continent.